Hey everyone, Bren here. Welcome to this week's garden update. And as you can probably tell, it's actually raining at the moment, which works out well because I did most of my filming yesterday. Plus the fact I absolutely love rainwater, especially this time of year when you're transplanting in the garden, you're putting in seedlings. This natural rainwater really helps them to settle in and establish quickly. And speaking of seedlings, I actually put in a whole bunch over the last few days, which I'll show you soon, as well as some other changes that have been happening in the garden over the last few days. So please just sit back and relax for a few minutes and let's get into it now. I love this time of year because almost every day there's something new to look at in the garden. Down here beside the chicken coop growing along the fence, there's this Wisteria which is in bloom, and it wasn't looking like this last week. I've been on YouTube for almost 5 years vlogging my garden, and I just don't want to sound like a parrot, but I think around this time of year I always mention how this Wisteria not only puts out beautiful blooms, early food for the bees in spring, but it also provides great shade for the chickens during the summertime. When the blooms are finished, what happens is it's just covered in foliage and it makes a lovely little canopy, a cooler, shadier spot for the chucks when it's a really hot summer's day. What I really love about this Wisteria is that the flowers don't open all at the same time, so it means that the display of blooms can last a lot longer, up to a couple of weeks. Like here, for example, you can see some of the petals on top are a bit more faded and almost gone over, while some of the other blooms haven't yet opened. As beautiful as it looks, I do have an issue with this spot, and that is what's right here. These are the noxious privets, which seem to pop up everywhere in the garden, and I have a few of them growing in here amongst the wisteria. You can see there's a bunch there too. What I really should have done was chop them back and tried to remove the roots during winter time when this was just a load of empty branches, but now I have to kind of get in there underneath this lot of flowers and cut these back, because if I leave them be they will get huge. And what tends to happen with privet is that for a year or two the little tree stays fairly small, but I think what's happening underneath the ground is that it's really developing a healthy root system, because after about a year or two it just explodes in growth, and then that's when it gets really out of control. So I do need to remove these little pests. Maybe on the weekend I'll get that done. This part of the garden has been flattened out. It was once quite beautiful, and it will be again at some stage, but for the moment this whole area I'm not gardening in this summer because we are renovating, and I need to leave this space free for building materials and other stuff like that that I'm sure will crop up and need some space to be stored. We're at the stage now where the slab is down and the frame will be going up probably in the next week or two. So it's all happening. I got one big job ticked off my list this week. As you can see, it's still a little bit messy around here. I haven't completely tidied it up. But what I've done in this spot is I've transferred 4 of the raised garden beds which were down the back of the garden that I'm not using this summer, put them in this place, fill them up. I've actually got them all planted out with cut flowers for my small business Bren's Blooms. In these 2 beds I have snapdragons, a tall mix, and now usually when it comes to my cut flowers I grow them from seed, which is the cheaper option, and then you make the most profit that way. But I've sowed my snapdragon seeds quite late and they're still tiny, so I ended up purchasing some seedlings. I calculated that each of these seedlings cost me around 70 cents, which isn't too bad considering for each stem that comes out of these I will be able to charge about $3 to $4. In this bed I put in 12 of the iceberg white status, and beside that one in here I have, I think it's 12 again, of the Fever View. I placed these 4 raised beds underneath one of our apple trees, which isn't a space I would have considered before for raised beds. But I'm just trying to make do and make use of every available square meter I have here in the garden. The reason why I think it's not ideal is because what can happen if you plant under trees? In my experience, remember, I'm not an expert, but sometimes with trees they can be quite aggressive with their root systems. And what I could find if I ever end up moving these raised beds is that some of the apple tree roots may make it into these beds, and what they're doing is taking away nutrients from the plants that are in here. Now I'm hoping that doesn't happen, at least for this season, and I'll get lovely blooms in this spot. I'll keep an eye on the plants, just making sure that they are looking healthy, checking the foliage that it's nice and green and lush, and if not, I can always give it a liquid feed. I have had to do a little bit of trimming here with the apple tree because some of the branches were quite low and I needed to remove them so that I was able to fit in or tuck in these beds. The chickens always seem to come over here to the apple tree or underneath the apple tree. There must be like loads of little bugs and insects that hide away in here or hibernate in here during winter because it's one of their favourite spots. Well, maybe not their absolute favourite. We have seen them a number of times in the raised beds eating some of my crops, haven't we? But this is definitely another space that they enjoy. While these beds look nice and neat, beside them is a big pile of timber, which is from our dismantled sand pit, which we had to remove because of the renovations. Now the kids don't play in the sand pit anymore, and I'm thinking I might repurpose some of this timber, which I believe is suitable to grow edible crops in too. Maybe I can make a raised bed out of it or something, or maybe I'm just making more work for myself, I don't know. This here is what's left of one of the bug hotels I made. It's fallen apart. It once looked quite nice, but now it's just some old pieces of wood that I'll probably need to chuck out. I must try and make another little bug hotel. Maybe I can do it in one of my garden vlogs sometime soon. I noticed today that there's a few buds forming over here where I have planted a bunch of Dutch irises. This pretty flower has also appeared over the last week or so. It's from a carrot, so I think I'll leave this be, and what I'll end up doing is I'll be able to harvest some of the seeds once these flowers go over and the seed pods form. I need to do a bit of investigating over here where I have the ranunculus growing, because a lot of them are looking awfully sad and dying back, and I've got absolutely no idea why this is happening. Any suggestions from you guys? Remember when I put them in, they were looking lovely and healthy, and now they're looking quite miserable. There are loads of these Johnny jump up flowers. Many plants have self-seeded around the garden. The poppy plants have put on a huge amount of growth. I'm almost certain that these ones here are going to be the salmon peony poppies, which seem to grow so well in my area. Lots of growth in the greenhouse. Oh, I need to give it a good water. It's really odd. I put some fresh sunflower seeds in here, but nothing's come up yet. And something else I wanted to mention. I think I said a couple of weeks ago that with each of these cells I put in more than one seedling, and then I just pinch out the weaker seedling and allow the stronger one to grow. Well, as you can notice here with the status, the special mix, there are a number of empty cells. So I think I'll scrap that plan of pinching out the seedlings, and what I will do instead is I'll remove the plugs that have multiple plants in it, divide them up, and then I'll place them in here, so I'll fill in all the gaps. Oh my goodness, do you remember this Spiraxis that I planted in here? They're a bulb which I've never grown before. Some of them are beginning to flower. Look at the colours on them. There's a pink one. It's interesting when I look at these flowers, what I think of is the 1970s. I don't know why, just that colour combination and the flower itself. I swear I've seen it before on linen and, I don't know, record covers or something. I wonder if these were really popular in the 70s. Does anyone know? These are the grape hyacinths. I actually recorded a whole section on them last week, but I accidentally recorded it in the wrong format. So I think I've missed the boat in showing you these in full bloom. Some of them have gone over, but you still get the idea here. They're very dainty, aren't they? Quite pretty. It's not all sunshine and roses over here in the container garden. Oh, I've been terrible. I haven't watered in a couple of days and we had a really hot day today. I think it was almost 30 degrees. Look at the kale. It's gone so limp. That's the one thing when it comes to growing in containers. It's great for people with small spaces, but you really have to keep an eye on it. Like, look here. The fennel is flopped over. I'm not too concerned anyway, because all I need to do is give it a decent water tonight and they'll bounce back. But I also don't think I showed you these two grow bags last week. So I did take a look at here, which is the potatoes. In here though, what I've put in are some of the anemones. Now I did have other edibles in here, like the ginger, the turmeric I think as well, and the garlic, but they didn't come to much, especially the ginger and the turmeric. I think I was just being too enthusiastic putting them in when it was very cold out and the frost got to them. They just ended up going all squishy. Anyway, look what's happening here. We're starting to get a few buds on the anemones. While the plants are quite tiny at the moment and these flower stems are short, over the next few weeks they will get longer and the flowers will get much stronger as the plants mature. Well, that is it for this week, everyone. But before I go, can we just talk about the elephant in the room? Or maybe it's the lack of the elephant in the room, because I haven't shown you any of my crops that I've sown for spring, summer. You know, the edible crops, which I mentioned last week, like the cucumbers, pumpkins, squash. And that's because I just haven't got around to sowing the seeds, unfortunately. Well, it's actually not that bad because I've still got plenty of time. So maybe this weekend I'll get it done. And if that happens, I will show you next Friday. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful week ahead and happy gardening.